Hi, and thanks for joining us for this quarter's economic update. With me today, we've got Will Hickson, our investment advisor at Morgans Financial. Will, can you tell us about last quarter's performance on the share market and what we really need to know going forward?
Yeah, sure, Justin. Well, look, it wasn't a great quarter for the Australian market, which fell 3%, so it was a fairly soft end to the financial year. The fall was primarily driven by bank shares, which dropped as much as 15% at one point on the news that the government intends on taxing them more via this bank levy.
Yeah, the bank levy is an interesting one. Will, what's your view of the bank levy, and do you see it having a negative effect for shareholders? Or has it been a bit of a beat up by the mainstream media in terms of like a scare campaign? Do you think it's been an overreaction?
Yeah, good question, Justin. Look, I think if there is a hit to bank profits, it's likely going to be less than 1% of their earnings. So, and it could be next to nothing. The banks are in a very strong position, and often they act like cartels. You know, you see one put their rates up and then they all put their rates up. So, yeah, if the government is going to try and slug them with an extra tax, I think it's more than likely they'll be able to pass that on to customers rather than having shareholders wear the burden.
Okay. And is there any other news for the quarter, Will? I noticed it was a fairly tough quarter for a few smaller companies that fluctuated a bit in value.
Yeah, that's right, Justin. Look, we saw through the quarter a lot of fluctuating share prices. In most cases, there was nothing fundamental driven by those market reactions, mostly just negative sentiment rearing its head. And look, that was mostly in small and micro cap businesses, so the very small end of the smaller business end of the market. Yeah, if you look at this chart, you'll see those micro cap businesses, the smallest listed businesses on our market, really had a tough period. So the micro caps are there in the green line. Small caps, the businesses that are slightly bigger than the micro caps marked on the brown line, look, they didn't fare much better, and they were fairly flat. So Contango Microcap is our primary exposure to this end of the market, the smaller end of the market, and that was impacted by the recent sell-off. But we're still comfortable with that investment. It's paying great dividends, and look, we think we're starting to see just the beginnings of that recovery for small business share prices now. You can actually see the green line starting to stabilise over recent months.
Well, with a new financial year that's upon us, what can we expect? I know in this update, Will talks about better growth prospects for the global economy, which we haven't seen for quite some time.
Yeah, that's right, Justin. Look, for the first time in a long time now, we might actually have both the US and Europe growing at the same time, which should be very positive over the next year or two. Look, that could be very positive for the global economy and share markets, which would ultimately be a positive for the Australian economy and share markets, in that a rising tide lifts all boats, so to speak. So given that enhanced probability of stronger global economic growth, we're thinking slightly differently about how we position client portfolios going forward.
Okay. And so how should we be looking to position portfolios going forward, Will, in what markets?
Yeah, absolutely. So Justin, behind me shows about where we think we are in the general economic cycle. So look, we've seen the tougher years where bonds have outperformed, and now we think we're headed towards a recovery phase where growth moves above trend. And look, that should be positive, or very positive, for shares. You can see there on the top left of the chart that it should also be positive for commodities, so the likes of oil, coal, iron ore, copper, etc. So with that in mind, we think it's going to be important that, where appropriate, clients have some exposure to the growing need for commodities. So you might get a phone call from us on this as we review portfolios.
Yeah, that's great, Will. And so it's good to hear some positive economic data is starting to come through. And it feels like it's been a difficult few years for growth, where the market for the last 3 years from point to point really hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah, that's right, Justin. It's been incredibly frustrating. Look, it really feels like the Australian market has been stuck in a holding pattern. We're still seeing great dividends, but capital prices aren't really moving up. Just a lot of volatility. If we're starting to see better growth from the world, we hope the Australian market can break that holding pattern.
Yeah, wonderful. So thanks, Will. And I'd certainly encourage everyone to watch Will Douglas's longer form presentation that's just below us in this email. Just note that any content in this communication should be considered general advice in nature, as it does not consider your personal circumstances or objectives. So as always, if you've got any questions, please feel free to call Will Douglas, Will Hickson or myself, and we look forward to hearing from you. All the best, and we'll talk soon.